Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 199. We are in the days coming from Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat, and proceeding to Tu B'Shvat. This week will be Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, which is called the Rosh Hashanah L'Ilon, the New Year, or Rosh Hashanah L'Ilon is the New Year for trees. This is also the week of Parshas Yisro, the Parsha of Matan Torah, and as we are customary to begin with living with the times, something relevant, and applying it to our personal lives from the weekly portion and the time in which we are right now. So let's begin with Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is a fascinating study because it's one thing when we say there's a Rosh Hashanah for human beings, the creation of the human race, on the sixth day of creation, which is the day we celebrate and honor Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Tishrei. 25th of El is the day the world was created. 6 days later, a human being was created. So it's obvious why we honor that. We honor our collective birthday, the birthday of the human race, which is also includes the personal birthday of each one of us, the creation of the human being to fulfill its calling in transforming this world into a Dira B'Tachtenim, a home for the divine. But why would we honor the birthday of trees? There is a famous, of course, machlekes disagreement when the birthday of trees is, whether it's Rosh Chodesh Shvat, according to Shammai, because Shammai feels as soon as you begin to sense the blossom, even though it's not yet apparent, he goes Basar Koyach, which means even potential begins. And the Hillel is the 2 weeks later on the 15th of Shvat, which is what we follow when it's actually the beginning of apparent birthing of the new season for the growth of vegetation, trees, and plants, and so on. Of course, in Eretz Yisrael, it's all referring to where it's all centralized. So why would we honor that? Why is it that relevant to us to know this Rosh Hashanah? The world has many different cycles, has many different natural elements to it. Why is it important for us to know? And the obvious answer is based on a verse in the Torah that says that when you come to a city and you may destroy the city due to its being an enemy of yours, do not destroy trees that bear fruit, because ki ha'adam eitz hasada. The human being is compared to the fruit, to the eitz hasada, to the tree in the field. So there you have that it's not just that there are trees growing, which is also part of God's creation and important for us to know that the sanctity and the holiness of every part of this universe. The famous story with the Rebbe Rashab, he was walking with the Friedrich Rebbe when he was a young child, and they were talking, and the Friedrich Rebbe tore off a little leaf from a tree, from a brush, from a shrub, and began to rub it. And the Rebbe Rashab reprimanded him and said, "What right do you have to intervene into the cycle of this plant, into this growth of this tree, of this leaf?" Because everything has a life force. And though I use the word sacred, obviously it's not sacred like a mezuzah or sefer Torah, but it's sacred in the sense of Bal Tashchis. You're not allowed to destroy any part of the world. And here it goes even further, based on, of course, what it says in the Eitz Chaim and in other places in Kabbalah and Chassidus, that every part of existence is there for a purpose and has in it a nefesh hatzemeches, is the way that Arizal puts it. That there's a nefesh hadememes, mineral world has its type of nefesh, it gives it life force. It's not a life force that functions like an animal or a human being moving about and with flesh and blood and a heart beating, but it still has a life and a trajectory. There's nefesh hatzemeches, the life force within semeach, within the vegetable world. There's a life force, of course, in chai, and there's a life force in medaber. A nefesh hachaya, a nefesh hamedaberes. So, what right do you have to intervene in that? So there's that element, but there's even deeper when you say Adam Eitz Hasada. It's not just saying that there's sanctity and there's value, and that in every part of the universe is that a human being is compared to the tree in the field. So it's actually an analogy and a metaphor for us, and we're compared to a tree. So the lesson number one, of course, is that we are all symbiotic, and every part of this nature, this natural world, is all dependent on each other. And the trees have its value, and today in science we know its value as it produces the different necessary nutrients, as well as cleanses the air and the different elements of what makes vegetation grow and how it's necessary for the balance of life. But there's the additional element that we are actually compared to a tree. And just like a tree has elements to it, that, for example, it's roots, and there's a tree trunk, and there's branches, and there's fruits, we too can learn lessons from that. And the obvious lesson is that we too have to have roots. Everything has to be rooted, deeply rooted in, and grounded and anchored in that which came before us. That's what roots are. Roots are connecting the tree to its sustenance, to the water, and the water that gives it, that sustains the tree. The trunk is the foundational element in the sense it's being like the foundation. The branches is branching out and growth in all different directions. And the fruit is that we all have to bear fruit, and not just enough to sustain ourselves, but also to influence others, to be a light that illuminates, a ner lahoyer. So in the idea of the New Year of Trees, we learn lessons in our own lives. I just gave one general one, but the fact is, in many of the sichos of the Rebbe, and it's interesting, even though there are some Modim on Tu B'Shvat, but the Rebbe was far more emphasizes Tu B'Shvat than you'll find in the Maimorim prior to the Rebbe. There isn't a Ratera, there's some short pieces, but the Rebbe actually said Maimorim on the Tu B'Shvat, connecting to Tu B'Shvat, and many sichos and letters where he derives many different lessons in addition to the one that I just mentioned. And of course there's the Shiva Minim, there's the 7 different species, which Eretz Yisrael, Nishtapche ben Eretz Yisrael, that praise and describe the beauty of Israel. So each one of them also has lessons in our personal lives. I've discussed this in the past, and here I cross-reference you to previous episodes 54, 100, and 149. All these can be seen at our landing page on our website, meaningfullife.com/MyLife. And there you can find the archives, and they're all timestamped, so you can find exactly what you're looking for quickly and easily. So this is one of the lessons, applying it to our personal lives, which means that like a tree, if you look at a tree, it's the only thing that grows in 2 different directions at once. It grows downward as the roots go and search out their sustenance. So those are the roots that we have to have, the shroshim, the roots, Zugibun Eben, even though here it's below, but as we know, Zugibun Eben is also, it says in Kabbalah that the Yesod, the foundation, below, the foundation is below the building. But Lamaila and above, in the Ruchnisdik world, the foundation is above because it begins with the foundation. So here too, it begins with the foundation, the roots, that if you'll see at any tree in its early stages, the first thing it has to have roots. At that point, it's not thick roots, it's not long roots, it's short ones, but they're still necessary to spread out because they become the foundational element that is beneath the surface. And it's fascinating to see when you ever see a tree uprooted, that the roots is a whole complex system that you don't even realize it until you see it, how it spreads out, and the roots have that wisdom to look for the fastest route to get their sustenance. In addition, they do serve as a type of foundation. But then there's the foundation, which is the exposed foundation, which is the trunk of the tree, which is essentially that each of us has to have fundamental values, besides the ones that are beneath the surface, that connect us to the past, our teachers, in the context of Torah, Ish Mepi Ish, we have the roots, everything, Moshe Kibbel Torah, Messina, Masar, Yeshua, Liskenim, that we have the passing on of Meseira, of the tradition from generation to generation. We also have to have a revealed trunk, which is what holds us up. That can be our home, the binyan ad that we build, the home that we build. In addition to that, and the values that are the unwavering values, which is the necessity for a tree to stand, it has to have that trunk. That trunk then has the power, once it has those foundational elements, the roots and the trunk, then you have the power to be able to spread out, and that's what the branches. Spreading out means you begin, Pru, Ruvu, Milas, Ha'aretz, V'kivshua. We'll talk in a minute about the fruits, but before there are fruits, you first need to spread out. You can't just remain in your secluded little area. You spread out, and the tree spreads out, its branches spread out, it grows leaves, it becomes shade. So we too have to be a source of protection and spread out in our influence and our impact on those around us. But you can have an impact that not necessarily is perpetual. So here come the fruits. The fruits is that when you bear fruit, a fruit then can in turn, besides the fact that it can sustain people because you can eat the fruit and the pleasure that comes from a fruit, the peiros, there's my peida mitzvahs. It says, what are peiros? These are mitzvahs. Till the saying shel tzadikim is ma'asim tevim. the fruit of tzaddikim, their offspring, are good deeds. But another thing with fruit is the fruit has seeds, and the fruit can perpetuate the seeds of the tree, whether it's an apple tree or another type of tree, that then creates a tree, one tree creates another, one tree creates another tree, and it perpetually has an impact generational. As that basically, in other words, the pruruvu that we sell as we multiply, and we bear children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that go on perpetuation of our own lives and our influence of our lives. So there you have an applied story, applied application, I should say, an applied lesson from Tu B'Shvat in the context of Chassidus Applied. We're also in the week of Parshas Yisro. Parshas Yisro is a very fascinating parsha. Firstly, of course, it's the story of Matan Torah, the greatest event in history, which is Sinai, where Hashem, God, gave us the mandate. The mandate, the human being formally was received on that. On that day, we received formally the mandate for the purpose of our creation, of our existence. And as a result, we now have the ability to be able to fulfill, as the Chassidus speaks about, the transformation of the physical world, which is the transformation of bringing together the material and the spiritual. That until then there was Exeda, until Matan Torah, until Sinai, there was Exeda, there was a decree, and there was also, you can say, a schism, where matter and spirit could not be joined together. That which was above, which means that which was spiritual remained in the spiritual domain, and that which was material remained in the material domain. You couldn't transform matter into spirit. Einstein's E equals mc squared was not possible yet. The concepts of matter and spirit joining together did not exist. But then came Sinai, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. God descended on Mount Sinai, as we read in the chapter. And Moshe ascended on the mountain, and there was the interface where heaven met earth for the first time. But it wasn't a one-time thing. It gave the power from here on that we can actually take a physical part of the world and transform it. So it's, of course, one of the most momentous event in history, because it gives us the power to fulfill the purpose for which we were created. The big question that's asked, if that's indeed the purpose, so why was the Torah not given right at the beginning of creation? God created the universe 26 generations earlier with Adam and Eve. Why did they not receive the Torah formally? We know that they, as well as the patriarchs and the matriarchs, they fulfilled the Torah even before it was given. But why was it formally not given to them? Why wait 26 generations when you can't really transform the world? It takes 26 generations. Why wait? And one of the main answers for that is because just like it is with the education of a child, same question can be asked, why are we born children? Why aren't we born adults? Adam and Chava were born as 20 years old. So they should immediately begin la'avda l'shamra, to serve and protect, to fulfill their calling in this world. Why are we not born as adults? Because in the process of how we want the Aveda, the service, to be, it says it should be a mamata lamayla, which means self-initiated. Aveda b'kayach atzmei. So it cannot be a gift from above. It has to be something we earn. And we earn it by going through the stages of development and maturity from childhood, which is the stages of when we're educated and we're trained. Think of it like a training ground to prepare us, because if the key element is to make a dira b'tachtena, which means to just transform that which is below, if the power of it comes from above and we're immediately born into a world where we're mature and we're already given all the powers from above, it defeats the purpose. The purpose is that it should come from us. So the first 26 generations were dedicated to doing exactly that, preparing the ground from below. So yes, there was a certain strength given from above, and that's what it says, that the Chav of Deidus, when the Zunim b'chazah shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they were sustained b'chazah shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means from God's kindness, which is like when parents provide everything for their children. But the goal is that the children should grow and mature and be educated in the process. And when it came to Matan Torah, which is sometimes compared to Bar Mitzvah, now they were ready. They earned their way. The Ovis they first tread the ground and basically prepared the ground. And each generation, until the seventh generation from Abraham, from Avram, was Moshe Rabbeinu, who received the Torah after they left Egypt, which was the ultimate preparation. They went through the Yisurim, the difficulties, the Kur HaBazel, the smelting, like a melting, like the smelting of metal to harden it, Korabazel, in order to be able to appreciate from the bottom up, then to receive the Torah from above. And this is an ongoing process, a constant partnership where we do our effort. That is why it came from below. And that also explains, Chassidus explains, why is this chapter called Yisro? It's interesting, Yisro was a non-Jew. He was actually a Kohen Midian, which means he was a priest, knowledgeable in all the wisdoms and philosophies and Avodah Zarah and every form of idolatry that existed. And so why is a chapter, Matan Torah, called in the name Yisro? Not only that, it says that Matan Torah could not have happened unless Yisro came first. Why? Because he had to say Ati Yadaiti. He came, his acknowledgement and awareness, he says, now I recognize that among all the wisdoms, everything that I have seen and been exposed to, this is the God that supersedes, that's greater than all of that. That acknowledgement of Yisro, that was the final preparation that we can now give the Torah. So the question is asked, what do you need? Do you need Yisro's acknowledgement? After everything the Jews went through, we need Yisro to acknowledge. And indeed, the name Yisro comes one of the words Yisrein, which means added something. He added a chapter in the Torah. He actually added this dimension that allowed the Torah to be given. And in this chapter, named after him, we are given the Torah. So Chassidus explains, because Yisrein also means the advantage, the strength, the power of light you can see when? Through darkness. Because the whole purpose is transforming the world, so you need the world to recognize this transformation. Again, if it comes completely from above, it's defeating the purpose. So Yisro was like acknowledgement, like an endorsement. When you get the endorsement from someone that does not have any subjective interests, it's like an endorsement that you can't buy. It's like you get that type of testimonial that acknowledges that even from my perspective, knowing all the wisdom of the world, I recognize this the power that God has and the connection he has with the Jewish people. That was the ground that prepared that the world can be ready, because the world is now ready. Even the Yisro acknowledges that the world is ready to receive this power. So you have here a tremendous lesson in our own personal lives. We were talking before about Tu B'Shvat, but the lesson here comes down to, in each in our own lives, is the same idea. It's one thing growing up and in an environment of Kedusha and Daled Amos of Kedusha, which means a holy environment, going to school and getting education. It's another is going into a material world, which is initially hostile and can oppose everything that's divine, and it too should acknowledge the power of this of Torah and of Chassidus. The whole idea of Chassidus came Yefutzu Meinesecha Chutza, spreading the wellsprings Chutza. Chutza is Yisro. Torah in general was given Chochmas b'Chochmas b'Chutza Yerunu b'Chutza. That Torah is also, it's meant to affect the Chutza. Torah was not Leba Shamayim, Torah is not Chochma b'Chutza Teruna. That Torah is not meant to remain in heaven. It's not meant to be heaven. It's meant to be given down on earth. Dafka here in this material world. So even though the Torah is divine wisdom and divine will, comes from a great place, Shashuyim Lefanov, it's God's delights, the highest levels of the divine, and yet its purpose is to come down here, Dafka. Precisely here, and transform the world. In the world of a Yisro, that should acknowledge. So when we apply Chassidus to our lives and we demonstrate that that even though we live in a world where Chochma Bagoyim Tamen, which means that the wisdom exists, philosophies and psychologies and different ways of thinking exist in the material world, in the secular world, yet we come to realize that all the nations realize the wisdom of Torah, and you see that the Torah's wisdom can be applied to our personal lives. Personal lives meaning our own challenges that we have, whether it's in marital issues or in personal psychological issues, dealing with fears, dealing with insecurities, dealing with balancing the material and the spiritual, dealing with children, dealing with all the topics we talk about, now 199 episodes. That's the ultimate demonstration, the power of Torah. That Dafka, even in a world like that's the power that Yisro acknowledges. Like I mentioned a number of times, even though the Torah is beyond it all, the Rebbe asked the question, in Kuntas and Yonah Shal Torah Chassidus, the question is asked, when you say that the Gemara says that that Hashem created the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and then He created Tavlin as a spice to neutralize the Yetzer Hara. How could you say such a thing? The Torah is given as a spice? It sounds like some type of, like it's an accessory to the Yetzer Hara, a spice. David HaMelech was punished even for calling Zmiris Karisa lahu. David said Zmiris Hayalichu Kecha. Your laws are like song to me. So the Gemara says Zmiris Karisa lahu. You call it Zmiris, and he was punished for that, for so-called trivializing and making the Torah is only music for him. But Zmiris is a beautiful thing, but it doesn't come to the Shashuyim Lafana, the delights that is divine. It's connected. Torah is God's wisdom and God's manifesting through Torah. And David in some way minimized that by saying, these are my song. So how much more so to call the Torah Daven spice? So the Rebbe explains in Chassidus in chapter 18, in the footnote there, that no, that's not the point. The point is to say that Torah, Etzem HaTorah, the power of Torah is such that it even can serve as a spice to affect the Yetzer Hara. That's not just a very lofty and sublime and powerful divine force, but it can even transform. I mean, when do you see the Etzem of Torah? Is when you see how it affects our lives in our personal application, even in the areas of our evil inclination and our temptations and the challenges that we have in this dark and hostile world. The idea that Dafki Yisro brings us Torah. And today too, when you see when Chassidus is applied and explained to chutzah she'en chutzah memenu, to the outside, to the farthest outskirts, that reveals the deepest parts of Chassidus itself, which itself is like he explains in that kuntres in Yonoshal Teres Chassidus, which was delivered Yutas Kislev Tavshin Chavav, explains there how the Torah comes from the etzem of Primis HaKeser, Primis HaTorah, and that is manifesting. You see it dafke below, which is a concept that we find in Chassidus many areas, that the highest things are revealed in the lowest place. If you really want to see the power of an etzem, you have to look how it affects the darkest places. Yisur ne'er min ha'cheshach. So there we have a lesson, of course, relevant to our Chassidus Applied discussions time and again. With that said, this is a great segue to address a newly uncovered Yechidus with Rabbi David Raskin alav Hashalom, the long-time Mashpia in Temchet Mimim, and the head of Untitled Chabad that the Rebbe established in Tavshin Tezvav. So, and I want to acknowledge his grandson, Ben Sion Pearson, who is the one that was mafasim and publicized this, where we have a fascinating Yechidus, which if you want to receive the original, we have both the Rebbe actually edited it. See, Yechidus that Rabbi David went into the Rebbe Yechidus Tammuz Tavshin Yud, and he writes that the Rebbe edited it on the 7th of Tammuz Tavshin Yud. So literally we're talking about in the first year, just a few months after Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud, after the Istalkus of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And it also goes on, he says, also what he remembers that the Rebbe said to him, or answered him on the 20th of Sivan that year, and both of these are edited, but you see the Rebbe's actual manuscript, the Rebbe's handwriting on this Yechidus. I'm not going to read the whole Yechidus, I just want to read a few excerpts because it's a new revelation, I think very exciting to read, because particularly as you'll see in a moment regarding applying Chassidus. So he talks about basically teaching Chassidus and learning Chassidus and how it should be done. So the Rebbe speaks about before you teach something to another, it says in Medrash that you should review it 4 times yourself. And especially when you're doing a maimer. Not less than 4 times. When it comes to davening, the Rebbe says once is enough. And the Rebbe continues and says that even if you don't understand all the details, and even if you don't feel it, you should continue learning and thinking about Chassidus because it definitely will have an impact. And then the Rebbe continues and says, however, it's like walking with your eyes closed, even though the sun is shining. Tremendous example. When you learn Chassidus, even though you don't feel the impact, it will definitely have an impact because it's like your eyes are closed while the sun is shining. The sun is shining. You're just unable to see it yet. So you continue learning until you begin to sense and see that effect. The Rebbe then writes, there's mechol ois, from every, ois means from every word, but it also can mean from every chapter. You can, yochelim lasis bechein, you can take out an applied application. Fashtena os, a perik, the Rebbe adds, a chapter, for na maimer, o machna bechein, vosotzer geret in eis haskola, o yaveda. Meaning understanding a chapter in a maimer and making a bechein. A bechein literally means an application. Applying that idea, what was discussed in haskola, in this chapter, Scholar, which is more like intellectual, or Aveda in Aveda. So you see, Bechein is more than just Aveda. Aveda could be talk about Aveda, but Bechein is the application to yourself. And the Rebbe continues that this is greater, Hu Tev Yesa, this is better than when all the words are clearly revealed, meaning that you understand the Maimer. And the Rebbe gives an example. An example, again, you don't see elsewhere. The Rebbe says, when you want to pierce a hole into something, you do it through a very small thing, through a very narrow, through a very tiny, a dover dak, a tiny thing like a needle. You don't do it with a finger, which is wider. See, when you pierce something, a needle. He says the same thing when you want something to affect you, you have to immediately apply it. So even though the Bechein is only the lesson that you learn and apply it to your life, it's not the whole concept that the idea of Chassidus talks about. So it's not the harchava, the whole expansiveness. It's a very so-called narrow, small point, but that point, that punchline, that application pierces through. The Rebbe continues on, talks about more details about it. Very, very interesting Yechidus, I must say. And I just want to say what else that's relevant here. He speaks about how to be besimcha. One of the things he says about being besimcha, he says, always thinking that the Geula, where one day we're always kind of closer to the Geula, and talking about the influence we should have on others. But then again, this thing with the Bechein, interestingly, in the second piece, discusses it again. Well, to review, the Rebbe says again that that when you want to review something a number of times, that depends on a person for themselves, not for another. Depends where you have the chayis. Some people have chayis in learning something more than once, reviewing it again and again. Again, says by davening you don't need only once, obviously. Then the Rebbe writes in Hebrew, "Mekol inyan yeshlimse bechein ba'aveda." In every inyan, you can find a bechein ba'aveda, a practical application aveda, an application aveda. And the Rebbe says, "Ledugma b'maimer zeh." Clearly, he was writing to the Rebbe about a certain maimer. And the Rebbe says the maimer talks about Kol b'shamayim ba'aretz, talks about everything. Gan Eden Natachn, Gan Eden Elin, tzaddikim in Gan Eden go up 3 times a day. They elevate, and all the levels, even the highest levels in Gan Eden, are only a reflection of the divine. But through Torah and mitzvahs, you draw down the core of the divine. Atzmus Ein Sof. So what's the bechein? That bechein from this is how much you have to be machmir, how much effort and stringency or commitment you have to make to Torah and mitzvahs of kol keich ve'ez. So you see here clearly, not only that you could, but you should apply every piece of maimer. I remember when we taught Chassidus, we learned the idea. Sometimes there was a lesson and the maimer was clear. But to say that every piece we learned, immediately apply it to your life, that was not necessarily emphasized. Here's a clear hira, and I would say, I can't say, to me it's an endorsement to everything we're doing with Chassidus Applied. That's not some type of new approach because we have no choice, but this is exactly how you're supposed to learn Chassidus. Apply it to your life. Which brings me, of course, to the contest that we're middle of running now. The contest, again, if anybody wants to receive the Yechidus, you can probably find it online, but we're happy to send it to you at our forum at meaningfullife.com/MyLife. You'll see there's a forum where you can submit questions anonymously, but here you must send us your email if you want us to respond to you, because there's no way for us to write to you because it's anonymous. Send us your email and be happy to send you a copy of the actual manuscript of the Rebbe in addressing this topic that I just cited some of the pieces, and there's more. But I just cited some of the things that I found to be very applicable. I want to say one more thing actually before we go on. He says that when you're learning a maimer and you don't feel, this is what he says, if you don't feel chayis, you don't feel vitality or passion, the Eitzel is to imagine the image of the Rebbe as he's standing in front of you and saying the maimer. So it's another hira in making a maimer come alive. So this is the segue that we're now in the middle of running the MyLife, the 4th annual MyLife Chassidus Applied essay contest, and we're now open for submissions, as I've announced already, and it's been publicized, and we're trying to get everybody involved because the truth is we really made this a level playing field, and I want to share some tips, since there's a few more weeks, some tips that perhaps can help you in writing this essay. the most common reaction we're getting and feedback that we get is usually, how do I begin? Where do I begin? Where do I begin? From a mimer, from an idea? So let me share a few tips. There's really 4 ways to really write an essay. There's many ways to write it, but there's 4 approaches you can take. You can begin with a personal experience. Everybody has personal experiences. It could be an issue or challenge you dealt with, your own temptations. It could be fears that you may have had. It could be through your maturity process, different things you've gone through in life. We all have personal experiences. So it's great to begin with a personal experience because there you have the application. And from there you move to the Chassidus and say, okay, where in Chassidus, what in Chassidus has touched me? And look for things that actually can help you in that personal situation or have helped you. That's one way to go. Some can go from a more academic approach. People are more academics, scientists, or others in their field. It could be any field. It can be a field of finance. It can be a field of business. It can be a field of accounting and so on, computer programming. And taking from that, that would be the springboard from where you begin. And that again, if it's something that speaks to you, something you're familiar with, some type of insight or some type of methodology, that can be the way you go, and then you bring the Chassidus into that. A third way to go is from some timely event, something happening now in the news, some events that we're hearing about, and that becomes a springboard. And again, the same idea, taking a lesson, what Rebbe Rashab says, from everything we see and we hear, we can take a lesson in life. And then, of course, there's maybe the most classic approach, is going the other way, which is starting with the Chassidus, taking a maimer and applying that maimer to a personal situation. Each one of these is completely legitimate, and it just makes it a lot easier because I don't see anyone that's not able to do one of these 4, to be very honest. So it makes it less intimidating. Regarding the 4th approach, sometimes that's the most difficult one. It's one thing, you have a personal experience. But take a maimer, many of us are not trained. How do you take a maimer and apply it? So if you've been listening to the MyLife episodes, you can try these methods. I'm not saying it's the only way to go, but there's clearly, I talk about almost every week, not almost every week, literally, taking an idea in Chassidus and applying it to our lives. But there's something I saw recently that from the famous mashpia in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Chaim Sholem Deitch, lives in Yerushalayim, and is a classic teacher and so on. An interesting thing, 4 steps that he has described in how to take a maimer and internalize it, integrate it, which I would call applying it. What are the 4 steps? So I just want to share that with you because I thought it's very interesting. And again, if you want to have it in writing, please send us an email and we'll be happy to send it to you. We've also, I believe, posted it on the website or are about to post it, these 4 steps. The first thing is to know the maimer, to know what you're learning. And he says in very interesting ways, not just to know the facts, not just to know the concepts by heart, but to know the mahalach, the way. Like you know by heart where the light switch is in your bedroom even when it's at night. To get familiar with the journey. Like, sometimes you go the first time you learn something or the first time you travel somewhere, you're not yet familiar with it. So the first thing is a familiarity with the maimer, like it's personal in the sense that's like you're comfortable with traveling in this place. Knowing it intimately, knowing your way through it like someone knows their way to work or how to find their bedroom light switch in the dark. Exactly. Number 2 is open yourself up to discover a new truth. To realize this isn't just a maimer. This is a gilui chodesh. It's a new gilui, and not about you and your subjective interests and biases and prejudices, but basically accepting the truth of the text, not questioning it, as realizing this is a new revelation that can open up new channels. So it's respecting the text in that fashion, as divrei elikim chaim. So basically it's opening you up to have a new perspective of how to understand your life based on the divine wisdom that lies in that maimer Chassidus. Number 3, visualize how a person would act if he or she lived according to the principles set forth in this text. So even though we're not talking about you yet, don't let it remain just theory and a concept. Imagine if someone lived this way, what would they look like? What would their attitude be? What would they change? And then comes number 4, determine an aspect of that visualization that you just did that you can integrate into your own life. Once you've come to that imagination, that the concept, conceptually, what how it affect the human being, find something that can actually cause you to affect you in a personal way differently. I thought it's a very interesting way of looking at how to learn a maimer. Now, of course, in the context of the contest, there's no need to learn an entire maimer, even though learning a maimer doesn't hurt and it can only help. But it's mostly taking the concept, and I think this is also helpful to make it accessible and relevant to everyone. And as we've stated a number of times, the first prize, of course, is a $10,000 prize that is open to anyone to win. We see from the last 3 years, the winners were not necessarily the biggest mashpiyim and the biggest fashteyers of Chassidus, but it was people who took all the elements that we have in the guidelines, and critical that you follow those guidelines. There's 2 other tips I keep saying. Number 1 is follow the guidelines. Meaning, after you write it, make sure that all the guidelines are met. I've seen so many essays that could have been winners simply because someone didn't follow all the rules. They weren't the winner. The second thing is show it to someone, or to one or more than one person. Get them to give you feedback. It's worth it. So there's the $10,000 first prize, the $3,600 second prize, the $1,000 third prize, and we have a special track for students, a $500 prize that's exclusively only for students 14 to 21. They are also eligible to the other prizes, but this prize is only for students, to make it a little more competitive and also accessible, because some students may feel that maybe they can't compete with others, even though I feel they can, but regardless, we made one specially for students. The contest is running. Its due date of essays is February 16th, Rosh Chodesh Adar, 11:59 a.m. It's a Friday. So we have, we're now in Yud Bei Shvat, so you have a good 3 weeks left, or it would be 22, yeah. So please submit your essays, share this with others, and Hashem bless you all, and may the best one win. But as I said, everyone is always a winner, because the mere act doing this, as you may have seen the video that's going around from some of the previous year winners, literally is life transforming, literally. So good luck, everyone. And we will be making more announcements as we go, and I hope some of these tips are helpful to you in giving you more confidence and feeling the courage to be able to take this on. And what do you have to lose, as they say? Okay, let's move on now to another topic. And the topic is the expression fake news being overused? So this is actually written by someone who says is following up a follow-up of a previous discussion that I had. So, let me make sure I'm here. Yeah. Greetings, Rabbi Jacobson. I would like to comment. I would like to comment on the letter you read from the man who was writing about his struggle to face his own difficulties, and ended by saying that he hopes he can stand up to them as well as Donald Trump is standing up to the fake news media. I thought that the writer made some good points, but his use of the phrase fake news media deeply troubled me, because it is a slur against all those practicing journalism. Are we to consider the articles written by Ari L. Goldman about the Rebbe Chabad in the New York Times to be fake news? Was the panel you participated in on CNN after the Rebbe's passing fake? By disparaging the journalistic profession through the use of such a phrase, the person who uses it disparages all the people working in that profession, including many of our fellow Jews. I will not go into the danger that such a phrase presents in a democratic society, in which a free press is one of the pillars of a free society, but just want to make the point that it is, to my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a form of lashon hara. Okay, very much appreciate your comment. It's a very good comment. So let's talk a bit about this. Let's start from the Chassidic point of view. I think I talked about this a number of weeks ago. And that is, according to Chassidim, the Chassidic expression is that we live in an alma de shikra. This whole world is a world that lies. The first big lie is the Tzimtzum Arishan conceals the divine presence, and we think we're just independent entities, can do whatever we want. Yes, we were given free will, but the big lie is that there is no divine presence among us, and many people can deny it or be agnostic or worse. So it's a sheker. As the famous great-grandfather of mine, the famous Gershon Ber Pahar, said, that when they asked him what he looks forward to, he says, after he leaves this world, he says that one day I finally come to a point where I will not be lying. Now, is he a liar? Doesn't mean everyone's lying all the time. It means we live in a world that is filled with lies, and we're capable of lying. We're capable of being duplicitous, hiding truths. I mean, you have a whole Because the justice system is one thing, is to try to uncover the truth because people lie. And we're all capable of it. So in that sense, you could say that the whole world is a fake world in that way. As I mentioned, I believe my grandfather used to tell me, my father was a journalist. My grandfather was anti-journalism, and he was to tell me, he said, everything in a newspaper is a lie. Even the date the newspaper was printed is a lie because it was printed the night before. I used to always laugh at him and say, Zayda, this is not Soviet Union, this is not Pravda, this is not MS, Ayin Mem, Ayin Samach, the newspaper that was published in the communist Jews, the Jewish communist newspaper. This is America. But you know, at some point you get a little older, you start thinking, what determines what's a headline? So we're not talking about objective headlines, God forbid, a war, a natural disaster. But who decides among thousands of stories what's going to make the front page that millions of people are going to see first? Or the home page? It's a subjective decision that may have merit, may not have merit, may be based on biases, may be based on people's prejudices. I'm not suggesting it's fake. But what's fake about it is this really the most objective headline that should be there? So we all know that it's not pure objectivity. To say it's fake, fake of course means false. False means a lie. So obviously we have to take a measure here, and I agree completely with what this person wrote. To start dismissing everything in fake news is not just dismissing journalists. You know, journalists, you could say, have their own agendas, and people have their don't have the full objectivity. But it's dismissing the ability for a person to convey. You know, we know in Torah there's also the concept of Eidim Ksherim, which are kosher witnesses, and Kol Yisrael b'cheskes kashrus. For that matter, everyone's cheskes kashrus when it comes, they bear witness to something. There's no reason to say it didn't happen. Now you could have Eidim Zeimin, you could have people who come and contradict and say it didn't happen, or you're lying because you weren't even there. However we explain it. But the point is, there is the concept of bearing witness and bearing testimony, and a person who may have the credentials, who's known to have witnessed something or has researched it and comes away with results, we do have an element of trust. Obviously, as it is critical in science, and so same thing with journalism, things have to be verified. It was one of the most important high standards of journalistic integrity is verification. Any story, especially a controversial story, any legitimate news organization, we're not talking about some yellow journalism or some rag, or that just publishes every piece of gossip, will verify. And they'll make sure there's verification. I mean, there's a big debate going on, do you accept anonymous sources? They keep saying, because of anonymity, this thing or that thing. Some say anonymous sources compromises the source because anyone can say anything. That's why verification is even more important. But what about 10 anonymous sources? So there again, each journalistic entity has its own standards. I would say if you want to have the highest standards, you would want to have someone on record, because it's easy for anybody to just slander someone for their own personal reasons, what's called a pashkvil. A pashkvil the Rebbe was so upset about was because people wrote things without a signature. So you can't even trace it, which anybody can do. You can go say anything you want to say. So I think it's a complicated topic. I think we have to be careful to go and call completely fake or completely absolute emes la mitose. That's why I mentioned the Alma Dishik. Emes la mitose is one thing only, Torah. That's the divine Torah, ein emes ala Torah. It's the divine, and therefore its integrity is guaranteed. It's divine. Obviously, you have to make sure the way it's passed on is also part of the emes, because you could also, someone can distort what it says in the Torah. You could have a novel b'reshus HaTorah, and a despicable person in the name of Torah. On the other hand, to go to say that everything so that's emes lamite. But then there's emes, and there's sfas emes, and there's sheker, and there's sfas sheker. Meaning to say there's fake, total fake news, and I think it's overused, the word, because it's definitely being abused. But there is a concept of fake news, and I totally agree to go ahead and dismiss everyone who's a writer to say it's fake is not appropriate. Some people argue that biographies, by definition, cannot really be true. It doesn't mean it's fake, but biographies, because you can't have everything in there, and you're always going to have some biases and prejudices. Now, the way the world deals with it, and this is a longer discussion, which I don't want to go into too lengthy discussion because there's more things to talk about, but the way the world deals with it is often is called full disclosure, transparency, that the writer writes their biases and they're open up front, so you can make a judgment whether you'll trust this idea or not idea. But the fact of the matter, any documentation of an event, and I guarantee you'll have 3 legitimate writers can describe an event in 3 different ways. Now, will it be extremely three different ways? Most likely not. But each one can put a slant on it, so when you come later, you'll find really two different stories. I remember when the Crown Heights riots in Crown Heights in 1992, and there, absolutely, I saw two different, I was there personally, and I saw things that were reported in the newspapers, whatever their reasons were. Either they wanted to show balance, or they wanted to show, I don't know, whatever it was, but they distorted the story. So that, and legitimate organizations like the New York Times and so on. So to be able to say that, to say because of that all stories are fake or all stories are distorted, I wouldn't say that. So I think this needs a wiser and more elaborate discussion to really be able to determine, but your point is well taken, and I felt it appropriate to address, especially in Chassidus Applied, because we are looking for the truth. But part of truth is saying I'm subjective, and I expose my connections and my biases and my prejudices and my preconceived notions in order to find a deeper truth. Okay, next question, and that is about kibbudim. How much honor do we owe our parents, especially overbearing ones? So here I refer you to episodes 13 and 14 and 94, where I discussed this topic in the past. And here's the question that's asked. I am almost 60. And I often wonder, how much do we owe our parents in the inyan of kavod? That's honor. My mother is a strong woman. My mother is a strong woman who has affected my life in the way many mothers do. That's how therapists stay in business. I admire her strength, but, a big but, her strength destroys me on a daily basis. I'm expected to call her every day, which I obediently do all my life. As I get older, I realize how affected I was all my life and continue to be by her strong, negative, self-involved, unable to hear anyone else's opinion. She's often said, I'm still older than you and I don't need your opinion. I take comfort in knowing that it's a big mitzvah, and I can truly say that it is at a great sacrifice to my emotional well-being. She has no idea how I feel, because frankly she doesn't even acknowledge anyone else's feelings. What are your thoughts on this? Thank you. My thoughts. So kibbud av v'eim is one of the 10 commandments, which we read this week's Parsha. And it says, in order that your years should be lengthened. It's interesting, it's the only one that it says is by in the 10 commandments. It does say this also by Shiluach Hakan, and in some other places, different mitzvahs that have a sgula, that have that power to be able to lengthen one's life. But it's interesting, some say, I don't know if this is half humorous or not, that honoring your parents is so difficult, so the Torah is giving you additional incentive. But the real reason L'man Yarichun Yamecha is because your parents are your Yamecha, they gave you life. But better stated, they were the shluchim Hashem chose as the third partner, Hashem being the third partner, these two partners that Hashem chose to send your soul into this world. So it really has nothing to do with your parents per se, which is why Chassidus explains, it's not shituf. We have only one God. Why is it we honor the messengers God has? We always say this, shituf. Avodah zarah is completely awesome, but even shituf, which is to say God as a partner, is also not acceptable in Torah. The disagreement about non-Jews and their relationship with the idea of shituf and a partnership. How could you say Kabbalah Avicha v'Semecha? Oh, they're partners. They're basically partners. So the answer is, how could we say that? Because it's God's power of life that we're honoring through our parents. It's not the parents, and that's why if parents ask you to do something that defies God's will, you're not supposed to listen. So al derech we say, for example, we say tivusa l'shakya, chamra l'mora, tivusa l'shakya, the wine belongs to the owner. But you say thank you to the waiter, so you say thank you, and you honor your parents, which explains why it says kabit, honor. It doesn't say love. If your parents earn it, they also deserve love. But kabit is honoring the life they came through, and by honoring the life, midi connected media, you receive life. So that's even parents who don't seem to deserve honor. I've discussed this, as I said in previous episodes. We have the story of Rabbi Akiva, who went on his hands and legs, arms and legs, hands and feet, I should say, when his mother, who was already senile, walked outside with bare feet on the glass, and not that she shouldn't get bruised, he walked, even though he could have said, she's senile, let's put her away. Everyone can understand Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva. The extent to go and honor your parents, especially knowing that they were once there for us when we were completely vulnerable. Now you'll say, what about a parent that was even there, not for us, even those times? That we'll just leave another time. I think I discussed it in one of those episodes, but we're not talking of such an extreme here. So I have to say, yes, you'll absolutely get schar and reward, and you have to be there in that way. And you know what? Strengthen yourself. Talk to others. Build up the strength and know when you have to deal with your mother, you're going to have patience, like divine patience. And I'm assuming that what you're writing is legitimate. Sometimes it takes two to hear both sides of the story, but let's even say that what you're saying is legitimate. It's important to reinforce yourself. When you feel that you're being hurt too much, so maybe you have to create some boundaries as well. It doesn't say anywhere, you have to be 24/7 sitting at your parents' will, even if they want you to. Boundaries are important. But the idea of completely ignoring or just dealing because your mother is strong and it's having an emotional effect on you, so prepare yourself, create proper boundaries, and do what has to be done, and try to also focus on the positive things that your mother has done for you, and the love she has shown and how she's taken care of you. But again, with a balance, and usually talking to a mashpia or someone with a little common sense can help you create the balance where you're doing what you have to be done, but not overdoing it, and it doesn't have to be completely on your mother's terms. This doesn't mean she has a right to abuse you or abuse your time or abuse your emotions. It means that we sometimes have to tolerate more, especially when it comes to a parent. And I don't know all the details, but this is the general gist and the general thrust of how to approach this. If you want to follow up, and here's again an opportunity, meaningfullife.com/mylife, where you can submit your questions, follow-up, comments, critique, you name it. Everything is acceptable, there's nothing taboo, there's nothing that is being censored. There are times I take with discretion, I have to rephrase or speak about things simply because of respect, and I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to say things that are sometimes as explicit as it's written to me. But the general approach, as you've seen, is really everything will be addressed. So please use the opportunity. I will do my best to find the answers, and when I have difficulty doing that, I could throw it back to you and get your comments and feedback. I also want to offer and invite, anytime I say anything, if you know a source from the Rebbe or from Chassidus or something that you feel can contribute to the dialogue, please do not hesitate, for my own benefit, for the benefit of all the listeners. And thank you, Mereish, Shuas Chen Mereish, meaning up front, I'm thanking you for the benefit on the behalf of everyone that listens to this program. Okay, next question. Fast davening. In my town, there's a Chabad shul. There are Chabad shuls and Polish shuls. The Chabad shul davens fast. Most of the time, I can't keep up. So my question is: it better that I daven in the minyan of the Chabad shul where it's not in the non-Chabad shul where it's not rushed? Okay, so a typo here. Okay, good question. In general speaking, davening is Aveda Shabalev. Ezu Aveda Shabalev, Zuhit Tefillah. I'm going to begin talking about davening a little more following this discussion before the end of this program. But davening is a prayer's work from the heart. We go to shul, there's the concept of a minyan, the power of a quorum, the power of the synergy of a minyan. But the bottom line is you're talking to God. You have to find the best conducive environment to doing that. If it's a shul where it's going too quickly, this is not about a loyalty to Chabad, not Chabad. This is about a shul that makes it that works for you. Now, there's of course the concept of Nusach Hari or the Nusach Chabad that you're davening. So that has to be weighed into the picture. But who says you can't daven that way, even with a minyan elsewhere? So I don't know if to say Chabad outweighs another shul. I think you have to find a shul where you can daven the best possible way. That's my response. If someone has, I have not seen from the Rebbe anything on this directly, but if someone has some source that can shed light on this, I absolutely would welcome that. But I'm using, based on my understanding from different situations, that would be the approach to take. Another way to go here is maybe you should talk to the Chabad shul. Maybe they should slow down a bit. Davening in general is too fast in most shuls. It's done almost to be Yetzirah, and you get out as soon as possible. When I was a child, I used to always say to myself, people should be running to shul, not running away from shul. Running to shul, wanting to stay as long as possible. It's a place where you have an oasis, a connection to the higher divine. So I understand we live in a busy world and people have to work and so on. So that's in general a problem with davening quickly. And you have also the Alter Rebbe and Ageres Chassidus talks a bit about other elements around davening that's not done properly with the right kavanah. Because at the end of the day, davening is about kavanah. And you have to apply yourself. Now, obviously, you need to have balance. But that would be my response to your question. I want to do a few follow-ups, a comment, a suggestion to me. We'll do a prayer and then we'll do the Chassidus question. Essays we're not going to be doing because we're waiting for the new essay contest and those essays that are being submitted. So let's do follow-up, a few quick follow-ups. All about last week's episode where I spoke about, is the Rebbe perfect? So I have here one person mentioned also the Rebbe Rashab going to Freud. And I neglected to mention and discuss. I said but this week I will tell you that I spoke about this at length, the idea, what means that the Rebbe Rashab went to Freud, for what purpose? If a Rebbe is perfect, what did he need to go to Dr. Freud for? So in episodes 91 and 94, I elaborated on this. No need to go over it again. Another person on that topic is the Rebbe Perfect, wrote, I do like listening many weeks to the recordings. Kol HaKavod, Rabbi Jacobson, for all the time you put into it. I imagine many are benefiting a lot from it. In my not so humble opinion, however, that this title seems not right. Is the Rebbe perfect? Much hatzlacha. Look, let me put it this way. We take questions of all sorts. To censor people's question because we're not comfortable with the question, I don't think is an appropriate thing to do. The point is to have the right answer and try to have the best answer. So to just judge something by the questions, and I'm not being defensive here at all, on the contrary, it's not the way to go, to look at what is the answer to that question. If this is a question people are asking, and many people are asking, it doesn't matter whether it's not our sensibility. Yes, I don't like it either to someone ask that question. Can the Rebbe make a mistake? But people ask that question, whether it's out of ignorance, whether it's out of knowledge, whether it's simply coming from a very honest, innocent place, even if it's malicious. But it's a question. So we ask the question, and I address the question. I've had previously people question also, why are you addressing that topic? Well, the whole purpose of this platform here is to address things that have not been addressed, unfortunately, and they should be addressed. They should be addressed in the Teiradik way, in a Chassidish way, and based on sources. So I'm not going to hesitate to address a question, even though the question may not be always politically correct or is sounding perfect to everybody. Now, of course, there are questions that can be very offensive, and of course, I understand the nuances, and every place you have to have a line that you don't cross, and I believe I have some lines myself. But even though for some people it may be uncomfortable, why don't you listen to the answer and tell me it was worthwhile talking about it? Because I can tell you feedback I received from others, they were so happy that I would address something like that because they were never allowed to ask that question. They were always silenced. And I will tell you what I think when people silence questions like this, to me, is projecting their own insecurity about it. They're afraid to go there because they themselves don't have an answer. So the best thing is, we don't ask such a question. It becomes a hiding behind Chassidishkeit. That, you know what, we're not going to ask such a question because we're so bottled and so, the Rebbe, no question, the Rebbe is perfect. But then when you look in that person's life, lav dafka, they live by that. Maybe they, it's very easy to say words and mouth slogans. So I'm not suggesting at all this writer in any way. I'm not challenging the writer of this point. I understand where you're coming from. And I understand the sensitivities, but I just want to make that point that this is one of the big things that I hear again and again. Thank God that you spoke about something no one ever spoke about before publicly. And I find that to be I'm not looking to do that, I'm not looking to be sensational, but to not talk about these things is much, much worse. Talk about them and find a good answer. Wow, you can talk about it. Because I can tell you, intelligent and not necessarily the most intelligent. Most people, they hear questions that are not allowed to be asked, does not help them. Because they ultimately do ask the questions, and at times feel that they're just being silenced. They realize, you know what, maybe people just want to be silenced because they don't have answers. So I wanted to just make that point, and thank you again for writing that. Regarding the question, who chooses? So last week I did not have the episode when you talk about there's the Nefesh Elikis, Nefesh Abamis, animal soul, divine soul. We spoke about, so who chooses? See episode 82 where I elaborate and discuss that at length. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now let us go to a comment and suggestion, and it goes like this. Shalom. I've been reading some suggestions which come in from time to time. I recently started watching your videos a few months ago. I have found great inspiration and wonderful guidance in them. Not just for me, but my job in communal affairs. I have a request. More like I am begging. I don't always have time to watch your whole broadcast. Sometimes there are only a few topics that are relevant to me, and time is so precious and little. Is it at all possible to do a table of contents? Minute 10, topic of XX. Minute 14, topic X. There's even a way to bookmark times on YouTube. I can't be alone in feeling the time crunch, and I can only imagine how many more people would watch instead of watching a double speed or randomly clicking on the timeline to get your advice and insights. Thanks. Well, Terem Yikrov Ani, and there's an expression even before you called out, God says, I already answered. So we learn from that as well as ourselves. If you go to the YouTube link to every video, and every one of the 100, now it's 199 episodes, you go to the description below, read more, you'll see each topic is time-stamped. That takes you straight to the topic you're looking for. So exactly what you're looking for exists. I mentioned this a number of times. I'm not sure why people don't seem to, people maybe I haven't announced it enough. So I'm announcing it again. And please remember, everything is time-stamped. You can find exactly what you're looking for. In addition, if you don't know in general which episodes in general, that's when you know the episode, so you can look at and go straight. Like if you want to know about this topic, let's say I just discussed about fast davening, you'll see fast davening and you'll click on it and go straight to where it has to the place on the video, on the broadcast where that's talked about, and you don't need to listen to the rest of it. Okay. Now I want to mention one thing I'm going to start talking a little about prayer, davening, because we have a lot of questions that have come in, and this goes back to discussions I've had in episodes 18, 19, and 20, and 140. As I said then, and I say it again, it's one of the, I don't want to call it a lost science or a lost art, but tefillah is so critical in Chassidus. And the reason is very simple in my opinion, because tefillah takes all the ideas that you learn in Chassidus and turns it into a heart and emotional application. Ezu aveda shebelev zui tefillah, as I mentioned earlier. So Teira is aveda shebemeach, learning. And tefillah is aveda shebelev, emotional intelligence, growth emotionally. Most of us grow intellectually after a certain point, but our maturity, our emotional maturity, may stay in the same place. Tefillah takes Teira and the Chassidus that we learn and turns it into an emotional experiencing, emoting with God, emoting ultimately with your soul, and connecting on that level. So that's why it's such a vital component in Chassidus. And there's no question that Chassidus would be applied far easier if people davened, and include myself in this picture. So I will just begin reading some comments on this topic and discuss it in the next few weeks. I will try to cover different pieces in addition, as I said, to episodes that I just mentioned, episodes 18, 19, and 20, and episode 140. Rabbi Jacobson, during the Yom Tov davening, and especially in the Machzor, I had to struggle quite a bit to avoid thinking about personal issues. Work, health, family, and the same issues with friends and family. I really wanted to focus on Hashem on these days, but the text and contents of the tefillah is an additional issue for me. They kept pulling me back into issues that seem self-centered and relating to health and even parnasa. For example, what am I really supposed to be thinking about when reading the tefillah on the Kohen Gadol, when he finished the Aveda on Yom Kippur? Seems like a lot of materialistic requests. Not that I ever minded that the Rebbe always blessed us with this in the days before Yom Kippur. Now today, I read Igris 24, that's the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, and it adds fuel to the question. We are told we look foolish if we use the time of tefillah for thinking about materialistic needs. Can you cover this in the davening section of your weekly class? So this was written quite a while ago, as you can tell, right after the Yom Tovim, but it's still always relevant. So this is just the beginning of many questions and comments I will address. Let me just comment on this. Look, tefillah, like it is with anything in Aveda, everyone lefi erech, b'chol ma'oitcha we say ma'oit shelcha, meaning relevant, relative to who you are. You have to find tefillah in your own way, how tefillah takes you on a journey into your own soul, into connecting deeper with the divine. Some people, it comes easier either because they've done it or because they're naturally wired that way. And for others, it may take a little more effort. But wherever you are, wherever you begin, that's the way to go. The request for material things in davening, the Rebbe explains already, is because they're not asking, and the neshama doesn't want it for the material gain, but because Hashem said in order to succeed in this world, you need to be healthy, you need to have parnasa. It's like this famous classic sikha of the Rebbe, Tavshel Lamed Hey Vav Tishrei, or Rosh Hashanah, I should say, Rosh Hashanah, Tavshel Lamed Hey, became a sikha about Tfilas Chana, where she cries for a child. That it's all about the soul wanting to know, wanting to be able to connect to the Eibishter, and the way you connect is that it's not, I'm not asking for my gain, I'm asking in order for me to be able to serve God in a better way. So that's not a contradiction. The point is that tefillah is meant to take you away from, yes, self-absorption, and emote with the neshama, which is connected to the divine within you. That's really what it's about. Not just conceptually with your mind, but also emotionally. So the way you begin is, as we'll talk about in a moment in the Chassidus Question, with the beginning, first prayer, Modeh Ani, choosing and single prayer is what I would always advise, similar to what the Alter Rebbe says in Hilchos Yom Kippurim, the laws of Yom Kippur. Better to daven one prayer, but kavanah, than to say a lot without. Find the one or two prayers that you can focus on, learn something Chassidus about them beforehand, before the davening, and apply that to your life. That's something everyone can manage. To say you're going to daven the whole davening on that level, if you could do that, by all means. So the thing is to begin somewhere. So let me segue, and there'll be more talk about tefillah, to the Chassidus Question of the week, which is going to be the conclusion of this program. What is the deeper meaning of Modeh Ani? And I bring Modeh Ani, even though Modeh Ani you could say is not really the prayer. Tefillah begins with the Birchas HaShachar, which actually begins with Modeh Ani, with Psukkah de Zimra, with the Birchas Krishma, Shema, Shemoneh Esrei, but it is the beginning. And you see, especially from the Rebbe, Modeh Ani, the whole Kuntas in Untitled Chapter is around Modeh Ani, and he explains why. It's a prayer we say that every child can say. It's a simple tefillah, but it also has tremendous profundity, as the Rebbe explains in that Kuntas, Api Pshat, the literal, Remez, the allegorical, the Rush, the homiletic, and Sod, Kabbalistic, the mystical, the esoteric. And then Chassidus, Yechidus, Nefesh Ruach Neshama Chaya, Yechidus comes and enriches all four and brings a whole other dimension to the whole picture. Dafka Modeh Ani. There's a famous expression brought in Ayem Yem that Modeh Ani is like a nekuda. It's a point, and that you're supposed to spread that point throughout the entire day to permeate and integrate it in your life. So what is the deeper meaning of Modeh Ani? There's, as I said, the Kuntas in Chapter elaborates, but I'll just talk about one key point, which is very applicable. I use it all the time for many different audiences. Everyone knows that there's no such thing as a business that can function without a mission statement. You need to have a mission. So the question is, you have to ask yourself, what about your personal life? What's your personal mission statement? And most people have no clue. Modeh Ani is declaring every morning when you wake up, even before you wash Negel Vasa, even before anything, that's why we don't mention Hashem's name, you acknowledge, Modeh Ani lefanecha, I acknowledge to you, Melech Chai v'Kayim, shachzata b'nishmasi b'chem l'rabba munasecha, that you return my soul to me. You're essentially declaring your mission statement, that your mission is not the job you do, it's not the shopping, it's not the commuting, it's not all the mundane and material things you're involved in. It's the neshama coming to this world to transform your corner of the world. A neshama coming here to make a dira b'tachtenim. And in the morning you acknowledge that by saying, thank you for returning my soul to me. Thank you for giving me a mission. Thank you for making me relevant. Thank you for making me indispensable. And you can apply, you can introduce many different ideas in this one short prayer. In the Kuntas in Chapter, he explains it more at length and in many different ways, but I'm just explaining in very simple English. That's what it's about. So the deeper meaning, the first thing is, the deeper meaning is you. It's about Modeh Ani. I acknowledge lefanecha, before you. And I'm not going to the diuk of every word, Melech Chai v'Kayim, and all the meanings. Shachzata b'nishmasi, that you've returned to me my soul, you've renewed my contract, a fresh new person. Chadoshim lepkarim, like a new soul, like a new birth, a new day. And that should infuse the entire day with the passion and excitement and the drive and the commitment toward fulfilling what? That soul's expression into this world. That whatever you do, from the breakfast you eat, from the traveling, from the work you do, from your interactions with different people, is all meant to be a platform to manifest your divine soul's mission in this world. Is there deeper meanings in this? Absolutely, and you can look it up there in the Kuntras. And one key thing he says in the Yechidus explanation, which is the Chassidus, doesn't say any names. It's higher than Shem Havaya. So usually you say, why don't we mention God's name? Is because your hands are still tamei, you didn't even wash negel vaser. But why? Because the etzem is revealed that's not affected by tara and tuma. It's the core of your soul that you're accessing in Modeh Ani. So the Modeh Ani on one hand seems to be so simple, but on the other hand, it's higher than all names, all shemus. Because Ani, your Ani is connecting with the Ani of the Eibishter. Shechzarta bi nishmasi. So that's one short application from Modeh Ani, and I will try to elaborate more about it when we talk in the coming classes. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 199. And again, I encourage you to participate in the contest, this 4th annual contest, a few more weeks to go. A $10,000 first prize, and even a greater prize, the transformation that comes from learning and applying Chassidus and fulfilling the mission that the Rabbi gave us, which is your futsu, meinesecha chutza, starting from the chutza within you, and then the chutza around you, and the chutza in all parts of the world, applying Chassidus, taking Chassidus and applying it to real chutza situations, life challenges in our time, in our lives. So much success with that, and please don't hesitate to write any questions or comments. Submit the essay, can be submitted. All the details are on meaningfullife.com/contest. You can submit it in English, in Hebrew, or Yiddish, and all the details are there, the guidelines, and all the ways to submit it, and everything that needs to be done. Haslachim b'Rabbi with that. Everyone should have a Freilich Tu B'Shvat, a continued Freilich month of Shvat, and every week's 8 to 9 p.m. MyLife Chassidus Applied. Thank you so much.